welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Andrew. Today we're here in Greenfield Village, which is one of our partner institutions through ALFAM. Will and I, we both have great memories of being here at Greenfield Village for their annual Civil War remembrance. And this year, with it not being able to go on due to the ongoing pandemic, we wanted to be here with Brian Egen and Jim Johnson, who are managers here at the village, and talk about the history of Memorial Day and Decoration Day. The practice of decorating graves goes all the way back to the Greek and the Romans, and it's been done all around the world. In the United States, we've seen it with the American Revolution and the War of 1812, but it isn't until the Civil War that we really begin to see the holiday develop into what we know it as today. And today we know that Memorial Day is something for us that serve in uniform is an incredibly important holiday. It's our way of memorializing those of our comrades that have died in battle, died in service to their country, and given their lives. And today we want to talk about how it developed into what it is. One of the very first ones that we know about, and one of the more significant, it happens in May 1st, 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina, where 257 Union War dead were reinterred from a mass grave at a Confederate prison camp into a cemetery outside of town. What's significant about this is the size. Over 10,000 recently enslaved men and women were participants in it, as well as several regiments of U.S. colored troops. And I think it's really important to imagine, especially in this time right after the Civil War, these people who just got their freedom are honoring the dead of these men of both white and black who fought and died for them by giving them a proper burial and a proper send-off. And from there, the holiday is developed. And I want to pass it off to Jim now. And let's talk about some of the very first Memorial Day.
Thanks, Andy. One of the first Northern expressions that we can document took place in Waterloo, New York. And it was Henry C. Wells, who was a druggist there in that town, that came up with the notion in the summer of 1865. And on May 5th, 1866, he took action, and the entire town came out. The three cemeteries were decorated. Each of the fallen soldiers interred there had wreaths put upon their graves. The businesses closed for the day. The flags were flown at half-mast. And it really was a full-blown organized celebration of Memorial Day, one of the first in the North for the fallen dead of the Civil War.
Well, Jim, I think that's really a great thing to talk about. And I think one of the things we want to express today in this episode is the change after the Civil War for Decoration Day and then later Memorial Day isn't just the fact that it's happening. It's the fact that we're now looking for a regular annual date. And so many people get wrapped about who's first and what's first. And I think with the concept of honoring the dead, the bigger thing for me is the fact that it is an upswelling across the country. You talk about Henry Wells. I can talk about Mary Ann Williams from Columbus, Georgia, of the Ladies Memorial Association, who very close to the same year writes a letter on behalf of her association to a newspaper saying we should start a day to remember the dead. And there are places all across the South that pick up this call. It's amazing where all it is. The first year this Decoration Day was recognized in Atlanta, Augusta, Macon, and Columbus, Georgia, also Montgomery, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, Louisville, Kentucky, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Jackson, Mississippi. There is a slight tweak that happens in Columbus, Mississippi. And the ladies there not only decorate the dead from their own side, but they feel compassion and decorate the graves of Union soldiers who are buried in the same town. And this little bit of compassion starts to look at how we discuss reconciliation after the war and even through to today. So I know that as we talk about things at state level, I know we also have entities that are involved in being with it. Brian, I think you can talk just a little bit about the Grand Army of the Republic's role.
Sure, and Andrew, thank you for your service. The GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, it's somewhat equivalent to today's Veterans of Foreign Wars, or any organization that advocates and looks for the well-being of veterans who have served. The GAR was founded by Dr. Ben Stevenson. He was a former Army surgeon. The first real sort of national effort was through the GAR. General John Logan, Special Order 11, in early May of 1868, designated May 30th as a day to be recognized as Decoration Day, to honor the fallen during the Civil War. He, or they, I should say, chose that date because it was the only date that they recognized that didn't have an anniversary for a major engagement in the Civil War. I think the first iteration of it, there were about 183 cemeteries that had recognized and participated in this effort. The following year, there was over 336, I believe, that had participated. By the late 19th century, it was embraced by the majority of the northern states and a few of the southern states as well.
Great, and well, we'll see that change, and we'll see Decoration Day become Memorial Day, and the recognition not for just Civil War soldiers, but for soldiers from all wars comes after World War I. Again, though, we are now talking about larger areas, the state of Michigan, New York, Columbus, Georgia, Columbus, Mississippi. This stays a very personal remembrance for a lot of people, and I think we've got a great opportunity here at Greenfield Village. I wanted to start this episode out here on the green because this is where the Memorial Day ceremony is every year, and we'll see pictures of this as we go further in the episode. But there's a very personal touch to the Civil War for the patron of Greenfield Village, Henry Ford. Andy and Brian are going to take us over to the Ford childhood home, and we're going to meet Henry Ford's uncles who both served in the Union during the Civil War. Come on over with us.
We're here over at the Ford birthplace, and we want to talk about Henry Ford's connection to the Civil War. And it's something that's close to both Brian and my heart, is that he had two uncles that served in the 24th Michigan Volunteer Infantry. And I'm going to pass off to Brian to talk about it.
Thank you, Andy. We're standing in front of the Ford birthplace. It was built in 1861 for William and Mary Ford, Henry Ford's parents. It was originally located about 2 miles from its location here, and ironically, it was one of the last structures that Henry Ford moved to Greenfield Village. He did that in 1944. But Henry Ford was born in this house on July 30th, 1863. Just 3 weeks after the Battle of Gettysburg. And very few people really have that connection or know of that connection with Henry Ford in the Civil War, as you just mentioned. So his two uncles, John and Barney Littlegot, had actually enlisted in the famous 24th Michigan. The 24th Michigan's first engagement, major engagement, was at the Battle of Fredericksburg. The 24th Michigan started experiencing some artillery fire. Colonel Morrow of the regiment realized this was the first time his men were under fire, and they began to falter, they began to stagger. So he put them through the manual of arms right under fire to sort of get the men back into their muscle memory of drill and combat, and they were able to proceed. And as far as we know, John was among the first casualties, and we do know that some artillery fire, he had been decapitated. He was buried at that time, we believe, in a mass grave, in a mass burial. And subsequently, we believe he had been moved with a lot of other veterans to the National Cemetery. Barney ended up subsequently serving in the 24th for the remainder of the war. He was wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg and then later at the Battle of the Wilderness. But had participated in every major battle that the 24th had participated in through the end of the war. We have a photograph, a carte de visite, a CDV, of Barney. At this time, he became sergeant. He's wearing the sergeant stripes. And on the reverse of the image, it was taken in Springfield, Illinois. And so we do know that the 24th Michigan was in Springfield when President Abraham Lincoln was laid to rest. And so we know that that photograph was taken at that time when he had participated there. Barney had survived the war, and he had moved to Groseal, lived in Wyandotte, Groseal area, and in 1873 was hired as a lighthouse keeper on an island in the Detroit River early in the year. Sadly, he perished later that year in December of tuberculosis. But by that point, Henry Ford would have gotten to know Barney and have heard the stories, and undoubtedly have been a part of the story of John sacrificing his life at Fredericksburg.
Well, thank you, Brian, for talking to us about the Littlegots and their service and their connection to Henry Ford. We're going to go over now and join Will at Barney Littlegott's grave. Though John Littlegott's grave is most likely an unknown at Fredericksburg, and he's the one who died in service, we're going to honor these brothers by decorating Barney's grave for Memorial Day. Here's to you, Will.
Well, thanks, Andy and Brian. I'm over at Oakdale Cemetery, several miles south of Greenfield Village in the Henry Ford. It's called Oakdale Cemetery if you look it up on Find a Grave. If you look at the Michigan marker out in front, when Mrs. Littlegott buried her husband and Henry Ford buried his uncle, this was called Sandhill Cemetery. That funeral happened just after Christmas, 1873, as Henry Ford's second touch to the Civil War passed on and joined the ranks eternal. We're proud today to represent all of you as we decorate Barney Littlegott's grave as a remembrance for all who have served and not come home from war. We'll leave you with a poem. That poem is not new. It was written by Francis Miles Finch in 1867 and was published in the 1867 September edition of The Atlantic. It was called The Blue and the Gray, and the story is of reconciliation, and there's belief that this poem helped people as they talked further about how to put the country together and how to work together again. Give a listen to this, and we'll leave you here.
By the flow of the inland river, whence the fleets of iron have fled, where the blades of the grave grass quiver, asleep are the ranks of the dead. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the one the blue, under the other the gray. These in the robings of glory, those in the gloom of defeat, all with the battle blood gory, in the dusk of eternity meet. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the laurel the blue, under the willow the gray. From the silence of sorrowful hours, the desolate mourners go, lovingly laden with flowers, alike for the friend and the foe. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the roses the blue, under the lilies the gray. So with an equal splendor, the morning sun rays fall, with a touch of impartially tender, on the blossoms blooming for all. Under the sod the dew, waiting the judgment day, broidered with gold the blue, mellowed with gold the gray. So when the summer calleth, on forest and field of grain, with an equal murmur falleth, the cooling drip of the rain. Under the sod and dew, waiting the judgment day, wet with the rain the blue, wet with the rain the gray. Sadly, but not with upbraiding, the generous deed was done. In the storm of the years that are fading, no braver battle was won. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the blossoms the blue, under the garlands the gray. No more shall the war cry sever, or the winding rivers be red. They banish our anger forever, when they laurel the graves of our dead. Under the sod and dew, waiting the judgment day, love and tears for the blue, tears and love for the gray.